Hi everyone. This video is designed for anybody who is starting an estate agency or thinking about starting an estate agency, or anybody who has already started one or is already in the self-employed model and struggling to get the results that they expected or that they want, or anybody who's thinking about moving to the self-employed or broker model. So this video is perfect if you're in one of those positions. Now, the reasons why a lot of businesses fail and a lot of estate agencies fail, or a lot of people who move to the self-employed model don't get the income and the results, is because their business wasn't founded on the right fundamentals to start with. And because it's not founded on the right fundamentals, it's very, very difficult for that business to achieve the expectations of the person that founded it or people that started it. Now, this isn't through a lack of effort, or doesn't mean the people are bad estate agents or, bad at doing their job. It's normally down to the fact that they just couldn't see what they needed to know. So you don't know what you don't know. And you just couldn't see, or they couldn't see what they needed to know from where they were stood. And this is the reason why a lot of people who've started a business and failed, or they've started a business and been successful, those two kinds of people are able to be successful in the future because they know either what made it work or what made them fail, and they know they won't make those mistakes again. But if you've never been through that process, it can be a very painful learning curve. And there's nothing more disappointing than just realizing that you've invested years of effort or months of effort and a lot of money and a lot of opportunity cost in something that was never going to work in the first place, but you just couldn't understand why, because you didn't know what to look for. So one of the common errors that people make is that they start their business either in a location or a marketplace which does not support the outcome that they wanted to get. So they go into it with an expectation of what they're going to earn and the money the business is going to make, and they start that business either in a location or in a marketplace that the fundamentals of that market never supported the expectations that the owner had. So one of the key things to look at before you make the step into starting your business or going into the self-employed model is, does the marketplace and location that I'm looking at support the figures and the expectation of financials that I want to get? So look at it like this, and this is something I often think about, is that you've got big high street multi-location brands. A lot of them are, say, for instance, restaurants, brands that we all know that are located in many different locations across the UK and across the US, huge brands with huge amounts of investment behind them. Now, when they're looking at a new location, these brands look at a very strict set of metrics to decide if that location is going to work for them. So they look at things like footfall, visibility, the kind of people in the area, the kind of other brands which can complement their brand, their average order size. They look at a huge array of data to decide whether that location is going to work for them or not, and is going to produce the return on capital expenditure that they want. So in other words, effort in versus reward back out. How long is it going to take them to get it, and is it going to be worthwhile? Now, if that's the effort that a large multi-location, sometimes multinational brand puts into deciding whether they're going to go into a marketplace or location or not, and the massive spend and brand awareness they have behind them, then what chance do we stand as independent agents or independent brokers or estate agents? We go in without looking at any metrics on the basis of, I like this area, it's close to where I live, I know the area, yes, this will work. We have to be looking at a similar kind of process to what they're looking at. And the reason making sure we have the right marketplace matters so much for estate agents and letting agents is because we cannot actually affect the supply in the area. So we cannot affect the supply levels. We can't affect the transaction levels. All we can do is take a slice of what is already happening or what is projected to happen. And we also have to bear in mind our competition, because obviously if we didn't exist in that location, that business would be going somewhere else. And the previous business has already gone somewhere else. So the reason we have to be so critical on the marketplace is we're not producing a product which we can affect the supply of. We are an agent transacting on what is already happening. So we need to be relying on the transactions that have happened previously, volume-wise, to predict what we're going to be competing for in the future. This is why making sure you really think about the marketplace that you're opening up into and where you're putting your location is very, very key to making sure that you've got a good chance of being successful. The other problem that I see, even in marketplaces that work, is the way that people set their targets. So let's say, for instance, people say, I want to exchange on 45,000 a month. And to do 45,000 a month, that's going to take me 5 deals. So they go, look, 5 exchanges, that gives me 45,000 a month. Come on, that's what we've got to go and do. But they never take it further upstream from there. So they don't think about how many listings am I going to have on my availability in order for me to get those 5 exchanges every month. So how many am I going to have to put under offer to get to my 5 exchanges? So what's going to be my fall through rate? And then to get that many under offer, how many units am I going to have on my availability list? Then to get that many instructions on my availability list, how many listing appointments am I going to need to go on? And then to get that many listing appointments, how many leads am I going to have to generate every? Where are those vendor and landlord leads going to come from? How many am I going to have to generate? How much is that going to cost me? And where are they going to come from? These are the uncomfortable truths that we need to look at. The reason we like to look at the end of the funnel, and we're all guilty of it, is because it's the exciting bit. It's like, 45,000 a month, that's just 5 exchanges. Sounds no problem. But when you go upstream and you extrapolate up the funnel, up the sales funnel, to where you're going to generate those leads at the start, then things get a little bit trickier. Today, what we're going to do is go quickly through the process that I have used in the past and that I have implemented elsewhere that I've seen work really well to cut through the noise and really give reality on what we're going to be looking at marketplace-wise and lead generation. So this is always the first step. If you're thinking about starting a business or you're thinking about going self-employed, it's a really big commitment. And there's a massive opportunity cost. Life is very much sort of, sliding doors. And when you choose to go into a project like this, whether it's your own estate agency or whether it's your own self-employed model, then you're investing a lot of time and a lot of money, but also a lot of opportunity cost. So, you don't know what you're going to miss out on by the time you're going to invest in doing this. So making sure you have a really concrete plan before you decide to go into it is important. And of course, we have to live in a financial reality, or most of us. So we have to have a financial model that works. This business has to be based on something which works financially. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a target income. So everybody should have a target income, year 1, year 2, year 3. And that's what you're going to need to earn to make this worthwhile, because you have to decide if this is going to be an opportunity that's worth you pursuing, because you never know what might come next. So if this is not an opportunity worth you pursuing, then you're better off taking the time to go for something else. So you really need to make sure that what you're going to do is going to be really worth it for you. And the only way that you can work that out is by the target income. So decide what business you need to generate. So I always like to work at this stage on top line figures. You don't want to go to the stage where you're getting too much financial engineering. We can do that part later. What you want to work out at the moment is your top line figures. So what can you generate and work back from there? This figure is your key anchor figure of this is the turnover I need to make, and reverse engineer everything to that key anchor figure. So we've got our target income. The next figure that we're going to look at is our average fee. So it works really easily. If you've already got an average fee, or you're already aware of what the average fee will be, then that's great. It gives you a sort of, solid from experience figure to work upon. If you're new to this and you don't have an average fee, the way you work it out is really simple. Take your average transaction level. So you can find that out by going onto HM Land Registry, looking at what the average transaction levels are in the marketplace, or you might be aiming for a specific segment of that market. So use that. So you've got to get your average transaction price and then what you're going to charge as your fee. So you take your average transaction price, times it by your average fee, and then that gives you what your average fee will be. So we've got our target turnover. We've now got what our average fee will be. And now we're going to have to work out the number of sales that are going to be required for us to reach that target. So using the average fee, we divide our target income by the average fee, and that will give us the number of sales that we need to do. So that will give us our sales per year to get to our target income. So once we've got that yearly, I like to then divide it monthly, which will give us a monthly running target. The more granular we can get, the better. And these are the numbers that you've got to lock in because they really, really matter. Everything works around that. When it comes to working out your average fees, I personally like to work off just the fee. I know a lot of other people in their business plans, they like to build in like referral fees, might be from solicitors or mortgage brokers. It does make up a big amount of agency income. But personally, I always like to just work on fees, and I treat anything else as a bonus. I'd rather aim high and miss high rather than building in every piece of income and then it doesn't all quite come and you find that, you didn't make as many referrals as you thought. So I always just like to work off fee because I know worst case scenario, if I hit my fee target, I'm definitely going to have exceeded overall when I add my referrals in. So now we're going to skip over to plan stage 2 of our plan. So be realistic with your projections. We have to now look at the nuances between making sure that we're going to be really realistic with what we're projecting. So you need to estimate your conversion rate from listings to sales because no agent sells every single property they're instructed on, and no agent sells them straight away. It takes a little bit of time, and unfortunately, not all of them will happen. So I think averages are between 40 on the lower end and 60%, 65% on the higher end in general. But it does take time. So, so maybe 40% of the stock will sell within 6 months, or 40 to 60% of the stock will sell. So each market is slightly different. Each agency is slightly different. Depends how aggressive you are with what you're taking on, or how sort of cautious you are with what you're taking on. You might sell more if you keep your listings really tight and low. You might sell a lower percentage if you're taking on a lot of stock and you're just working on numbers. So it varies slightly. You need to look at your approach. If you've already got an agency or you've worked an agency before, then you'll know the figures that you're kind of experienced with and what you've worked with in the past. But it's important to look at now. So if I need to sell 30 properties in a year, how many am I going to have to list, working on a realistic percentage of listings to completed sales? Next step is we're going to go from listings to appointments needed. So we've worked out how many listings we're going to need to get to the exchange sales that we're going to want to get to. So if we're selling 60% of our listings, then we need to add that, sort of work out what 100% needs to be to get to that 60%. Once we've done that, what we then need to look at is how many valuation appointments are we going to need to go on? So how many market appraisals are we going to have to carry out in a year in order to get those listings? So if we needed 30 sales and then we were only selling at 50%, that means we needed 60 listings in the year because we were going to sell 50% of them. Then how many valuations or how many market appraisals are we going to need to go on in order to get those 60 listings? Now, again, this comes down to your area, how you like to value, what your fees are, what your closing percentage of appointments to instructions are going to be. But a good rule of thumb, if you're really good at it and you're not just taking on any old thing, you should be aiming for at least closing 50% of your valuation appointments. When you get really good at it, you should be closing 50 or over of your valuation appointments. If you're closing a ridiculously high number, maybe you've got no competition, or maybe you're doing it wrong. So, you shouldn't be taking on anything because your bar for what you take on as instructions should be pretty high. Work out what you want that percentage to be or where you think that percentage will be. And then that will give you the number of valuation appointments or market appraisal appointments that you're going to need to actually go on. So that will give you the number that you'll need to go on in order to get your 60 listings, which will give you your 30 sales, which will get to your exchanges. And now the next part of our calculation, going up the funnel, will be to get our 60 market appraisals or valuation appointments, whatever you want to call them. To get those, how many leads am I going to need to generate over an annual basis? So on a year, how many am I going to have to generate? So if you, again, work in agency already, you should have a percentage of valuation leads received to market appraisals booked. Now, that won't be 100%. It'll be far from that because a lot of people send in leads and then disappear. Some just are fishing around and just want a telephone conversation and not ready yet. So there will be a percentage between your leads that you get and your leads that you go out on. Now, that's going to be market dependent. It also depends how you're advertising, how you're getting these leads. But I would definitely build that in at around, you'd hope to be booking around 70% will be turning into valuations. Some might be slightly lower depending on where you're getting them from and what kind of leads, what you're doing before it turns into a lead and different platforms you're sourcing them from. But work out that percentage and that will give you your number of the valuation leads you're going to get. So if we're saying that we wanted 30 sales, and I'm just using very basic math here to make it easy, 30 sales, which we then we're going to sell 50% of our listings, and we need 60 listings. And let's say we decided we needed to go on, let's say 120 valuation appointments. We need to work out how many leads we need to get to those evaluation appointments, to get those listings, which will give us those sales. So this number becomes our marketing target. This is our key number. If we're not generating this amount of leads, then everything else in the chain changes. You're not going to close at rates which are unheard of. You can't rely on closing at 100%. It's never going to happen. If you're not putting enough valuation leads in at the top, market appraisal leads, seller leads in at the top of the funnel, you're never going to get the right number out at the bottom. And this is why all the efforts need to turn to getting this figure to become our reality. So our next step is step 3. And this is the opportunity is already there. So the marketplace you need is already there. There's a marketplace for you to study. There's facts that are there which you can base your assumptions upon. So you need to first understand supply. So we've got our number of valuation needs that we need. We've got the number of listings that we're going to need to get and our appointments that we're going to need to get those listings. So now we need to check, does the market that we're looking at or that we're working in support those figures? Are those figures realistic in the market that we're looking at? What we're going to do next is we're going to understand supply. So we're going to review the home sales data for our market. So we're going to look at all the transactions that happened historically on an annual basis within our location. There's varying tech you can use for that. Page and land registry is really good. So you can look at the average number of properties sold in that area or transactions that happen in that area and the average sale prices. And you've also got software out there which can check average fee for you and agent market share. So this can give you a really good picture of what you're looking at. What we've got now is the transaction levels. We can look at what the average prices are and we can look at what the fees are in the area. So you might know the fees already, or you need to use a software to look at the fees if you're not in the industry. And we need to match those to our projections. So does the average transaction level and fee percentage and transaction numbers look like it's feasible that we are going to be able to get the turnover that we need to match our income expectation? Then what we're going to look at is identifying competition. Now, in an area which is larger, you might be aiming at different segments of the market. So you just might not want to take the land registry data. You might want to look at that a little bit more. That might be the average, but if there's enough volume at different levels, you might still have enough volume in your segment that you're aiming at rather than just aiming at the general. But you need to look at the competition. Who are currently selling most of these properties? The people that you're going to be competing against most likely handle those sales that you're looking at in your historic data. So it's really important to understand where they went to, who's been dealing with them, why they were chosen, and what levels of market share they've got, and how many are competing in each segment. Because when you look at the marketplace, you'll be able to see what people are aiming at and what people are trying to win and what people are trying to sell themselves on. You're going to need to take that share from these people that are currently there. So these vendors and landlords, they're already out there. So they already exist. They're already noticing agents. If you're not already in that marketplace or you're not already operating, then they're already in their minds, like, even though they don't need it yet, in their subconscious, they'll be aware of certain estate agents. So if you want to become their estate agent, you're going to need to win that place within their mind. And you're going to have to overcome the other agents that are already there. You're going to have to replace them in the conscious of these clients. So when it comes time for them to choose an agent, you're the person they come to. So understanding who you're competing against, how strong they are, what they've got that you don't have, what you're going to be up against. If you're going into market appraisals, if you want to close at a certain rate, then you're going to be going in most likely against the incumbents in that market. So you need to understand who you're up against, how good they are, what their offers are, how much they charge, what their sales pitch is, what they sell off the back of, what their USPs are. And you need to make sure that you feel you've got a solid plan to put yourself within that market and win your fair share of the number of listings like the ones we looked at. The next step is to define your share. So look at it as a percentage of the total market. So start looking at, okay, if I want to be in that segment, and this is what the transaction levels were in that segment, and this is the number I need, and I need to get to this number first, and that number, and then that number. Look at what that looks like as a percentage. Look at what other agents have as a percentage, and see if you think is realistic, and see what you're up against. So if you're going to get in the ring with these people, which is what you're going to do, you're going to be competing. If you're going to do that, you need to make sure that you've got a good plan of being able to beat them. So look at your market share, look and see, do you think it's realistic that you're going to be able to get to the figures and get those amounts of valuation lead or market appraisal lead, and that you're going to be able to go on that many valuations to get you the instructions that's going to get you the sales? Because that's where the sales are going to come from. The sales are going to come from the people that are out there already, and you're going to be competing with the people that are already out there as well. So I hope this has been helpful. If you want to go a bit deeper, I've got a full video on this where I go through how you go about making sure that you can do these things, how you replace the other agents in the mind of the vendors, and how you impact the market. And we look a little bit deeper in these metrics as well. So if you want to check that out, it's on my website. If you want any other information, there's a lot of other blogs and information posted on my website, other training videos as well. I hope you've enjoyed it, and feel free to reach out.